our university and school partnerships. And I'm really excited to be the person that gets to introduce our wonderful moderator today. Stephanie Stanton, who is a good friend. Stephanie is a national TV news correspondent with a career and business specific bent. Stephanie has worked for such outlets as, I'm going to read here, NBC News, Fox, CNBC, Bloomberg, and more. Stephanie is also a great person to have here because she is the creator and founder of CareerChick.com, a website that encourages young women to pursue their passions to land their dream job. So Stephanie, I'm going to let you take it away from here. Welcome everyone, and thank you again, Stephanie, for being here today.
Thank you so much, June. Super excited to be with you guys. Thanks to everyone who's logged on here. Want to introduce our guest of honor, Harry Magnan. He is a principal technical writer, a veteran in the industry. He has worked for such companies as Facebook, Oracle, IBM, Intuit. The list goes on and on and on. Harry has graciously agreed to join us to tell us all about his field, the ins, the outs, so that we can essentially compete with him and and take his job. No, just kidding. But in all seriousness, thank you so much, Harry, for being with us. Let's first start out with the basics, because this was so fascinating. You and I were talking just a moment ago, and I like to go along with these chats. I'll be going along with you guys because I'm learning so much, just like you all are. So Harry, let's start out. It's great to see you. Tell us in simple terms, what is a technical writer? What exactly is it that you do?
Thank you, Stephanie. It's great to be here. And I'm glad you asked me that question earlier because technical writing is a unique field. What I do is I take a look at who the user is. Now that user could be someone like you logging onto Facebook, or it could be an engineer who's going to design an application. It could be someone on the back end who's actually doing everything on the server. It could be, or it could be the the network guys who make everything connect. So what I do is I take a look at who my user is, and then I distill down from who they are to what do they need to know to get their jobs done.
And are you writing, and so you're writing manuals, wikis, like where do you see your information?
So I get my information from the engineers and then I provide it where it's appropriate. So in some cases it might be an actual written manual, the RTFM stuff. In some cases it's a wiki. In some cases it's online help. In some cases it might be a website. There are a lot of, particularly today, the output could be just about anything. The question is, how can the user most easily access and digest that information? I'm working with a client, for instance, that is working in the LiDAR space, which is that new radar that they're using to automate cars. That's the stuff that actually tells the car what's around it. And we were talking about, who's going to be using this? And he says, what I really want is for people to be able, my guys got to be able to access it on their phone because they're going to be either in the car or under the car. So I take a look at it. It's like, okay, so I know the information they need, and now it's just a matter of creating the appropriate method to deliver it to them.
Okay, so there's so many layers to this, so we'll try to take it simple step by step by step. We do have a question. I guess I could ask you this now from Tova. Do you get UX feedback on your writing?
I do get UX feedback. And it's typically when I'm working with the UX people, typically I'm I'm interviewing them to find out who their end user is, and then I'm providing some writing, and then it's an iterative process. Particularly with a good UX team, they're going to be doing a lot of what we call A/B testing, like test this one, how does it work? Test that one, how does it work? And back and forth. And it's an iterative process until we hit the bullseye.
Okay, you have some examples. Before we get to that, tell us how you got involved in technical writing.
Oh, that's easy. Completely by accident. I was working in San Jose. I was teaching Introduction to Computing, Computing Fundamentals, and Business Communications at a small technical college. And the woman I was living with got a great opportunity at a startup in Santa Monica. And I said, that's great. She says, well, are you coming with me? I said, hadn't considered that. So we moved down to Santa Monica together, found a great place, and I started looking around, for a position. We were at a company get together. I met the founder. He says, what do you do? And I said, well, I teach, I write. He says, you write? I said, I write. He says, good. We need manuals written. And that was my first foray into technical writing. And what I discovered was I really enjoyed it.
Now, you and I were talking earlier about this. Explain the difference between technical writing and like basic copywriting. I mean, I'm a journalist. I can write a story, but what you do seems like on a whole nother level. Like you have to really have a technical affinity here, right?
Yeah, that's like my favorite cliche when one of my clients says something like, Harry, can you do white papers? And my response is always something like, yeah, that means I get to use adverbs and adjectives. So technical writing can cover the gambit. I've done white papers. I've done technical papers for conferences like the Very Large Database Conference.
So many different things.
It really is. And there's a different style of writing for each one. So it's a matter of, again, understanding your audience and then, what is the message? Personally, I like a minimalist style. I want to get the maximum impact out of the fewest amount of words, which is probably why I've never gotten paid by the word, I guess.
Okay, you had an example of something that you did, a recent project. Can you share that with us and break it down for us and explain? Because I think also what the folks here should know, and what I thought was fascinating, was not only did you technically write, but then you did some coding as well, which is an added bonus, I'm assuming, for your skill level.
It is, and I typically work with what we call API writing, which is the application programming interface. It's how someone, for instance, on the front end gets the information from the back end. They look at the API,
okay.
Right? So that's what I do right now. That's where the majority of my time is spent, is with the API. And one of the questions I always get is, can you do code samples? So yes, I do code samples. Let me give me just a second here to rearrange my screen. And my apologies, I should have done this earlier. Okay, share. Okay. So this is a project that I did for Moody's Analytics. Just to give you a little background on this, Moody's was moving from one tool. They had a tool they were using to do their graphical user interface. It didn't meet the current financial standards for security, so they decided they were going to do it all in-house. And this website represents what we call dog fooding. In other words, this site was created with all of the components that I documented. So, for instance, if you take a look at the components, you'll see, for instance, this is the tab set. And what this is a component that allows you to put tabs across the top of your screen. I think everybody's seen that. And this is the Moody's JavaScript version of that. You can see that the tabs actually work. And it provides everything that a UX programmer, a UX engineer would need to use the tab set. So I describe what it is. I give them a quick example. Are there any type of visual design guidelines that they should worry about? So for instance, what is the width of the tab? What is the height of the tab? That type of thing. And this is where the UX people and I would work together to make sure that we've got the tabs that are appropriately sized for the content. And then my favorite part was the examples tab. So this is actually a little sandbox where I show the designer what the code is going to look like in his IDE, which is like a, we'll call it a browser on steroids. So this is what the index.html would, and index.html is always, that is by default what the browser picks up when it goes to a brand new website. It's always looking for the index.html. Mm-hmm. So what I did here is I provided the code samples. If there's any CSS that needs to be applied, it's also here. And then if there's any JavaScript from the back end that needs to be associated with it, that is also noted, so they know how to actually include it. And with this, you know, it's the type of thing where you can actually go in and play with it. And then click try it now.
Oh.
Oh, let me actually complete that. And there are the changes. You can see them.
Yep. Tova had another question. Are you better at documenting your code as a technical writer?
That's an area that engineers and technical writers always have interesting discussions on. Someone who's really good at code is going to document it in place. And this is a good example because all of the components, all the documentation that you see in the components, used a product called JavaDoc, and I actually wrote the documentation inside of the component. And then when it was distilled, it created the website or the Java app here. And to give you an example of that, if we take a look at the getting started and development tools, you can see where I actually used those components to write the website or the JavaScript app.
Harry, would you, with regard to the fact that you are so good at coding, you know it, obviously, maybe not all technical writers would know it, or maybe they would. I mean, is it, in today's day and age, I mean, realistically, is it not better to know the basics, at least, of coding if you're going to be a technical writer?
You know, it all depends. I have friends who specialize in UX technical writing, and they don't do code. They want nothing to do with code. I've got other friends that are more specialized in an industry. For instance, they specialize in the power industry. So what they are really good at is writing stuff like NERC certification documents and the processes and procedures around that. In other cases, in a former contract, I was working with Amgen, and I did a lot of desktop instructions for a enterprise application that they were installing. So it all depends upon where you want to go and what you want to do. I've been fortunate enough to been able to play in a lot of different sandboxes.
That's cool. Yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, how hot of a field right now? How in demand are technical writers? You fell into it by accident, but I imagine people can get degrees, a degree
You
in
know,
it now.
if I had to do things over, I would have gotten a degree in technical writing. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I would have gotten a degree in technical writing. I would have gotten my Agile Scrum certification, and I'd have gotten my project management certification. You put those three together, and you're going to make a whole lot of money and have a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I know you are essentially project-based at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there are probably full-time staffers at some of these major
Absolutely.
companies. Give us the gamut of that, and then give us some rough salary estimates.
That's an interesting question. I'm in Silicon Valley, so I'm making a premium dollar here.
Mm-hmm.
If I were in Phoenix, not so much. I would say that a good technical writer coming out of school with no experience is going to be in the 60 to 70K range. And if someone wanted to hire me full time, we'd probably be looking at 160 to 180, and then bonuses depending upon performance.
But
what am I delivering?
But now you're freelance, so that's an option for people as well. Is that difficult to get into?
No, it's not, and that's actually a good way to build a portfolio.
And how do you get your gigs? Just networking, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn has been absolutely amazing. I would say that right now I'm averaging 5 to 10 inquiries a day.
Wow, that's great. And do
So,
you farm out, like if you don't have the time for you physically to do that? Do you have people to work with?
I do not, but I know a lot of people that do. Let me take that back. That was inartfully said. I know people who are in a position to take on extra projects like that.
Cool. Tina wanted you to repeat those certifications. Can you repeat those again slowly?
Sure.
Write those down, actually.
Sure. Agile Scrum, and being a Scrum Master is not a bad idea because most in-house engineering these days is working on some type of an Agile system. And then PMP is a project management professional.
Okay. And then there was one more. Did you have another one?
That was
and then
a degree of technical writing.
And is that something where most, I mean, I imagine the Stanfords and everything is that a degree that's pretty wide ranging these days?
There are a number of schools that have degrees in actual technical writing. I have a lot of associates that just have degrees in history, philosophy, and it works well. I mean, the question is, can you communicate with the end user and the engineer and craft the message that satisfies them both? I look at a project and it's successful when the end user is happy and the engineer knows he's been heard. And not just listened to, but knows he's been heard.
How critical is your job? Because it sounds like you are, as you said, the conduit from different folks. I'm just playing devil's advocate for a moment. Are there companies or people that could just say, well, why do we need Harry? Like, let's just get together and do it ourselves. I'm just trying to,
Oh yeah, that's a fair question. That's a fair question. And the reason I'm here is because engineers do a great job at writing code, and they often don't understand who their end user is. They don't understand the end user, and then they don't know how to get the essence of what the message is. I spent months at Facebook rewriting engineering ease. When they write, it just tends to be like a stream of consciousness.
Way over our heads.
It's a stream of consciousness, and when they're done, they're like, yeah, okay, that's good. And then I look at it, and it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to do to get the job done?
Darn smart people.
And the other part is engineers are always working on code. They've always got a project to work on. So documentation that's just a second thought. It's like, do I really have to?
Interesting. Yeah, they might not like it. Like you said, right. They're specializing in, they love the coding, they love the building, their engineering. They don't want to be bothered with, boiling it down for,
And, there are a lot of engineers where, English is a second language. So it may not, it may not read as well as an end user would like.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So you're able to sort of bridge that gap. That's actually a really cool way to think about
That's what I do. That's what I do. And the last, and I'm going to say probably dozen interviews, contract discussions, if you will, on projects. The majority of the time, the majority of the questions are not specific to, can you code? How do you code? What languages? But how do you work with engineers? How do you get the information from engineers? Because they're busy, they don't want to be bothered. So it's really about the interaction and about what I can bring to the conversation. How does an engineer know that you're listening and hearing him?
It sounds cool. Like it does sound like it takes a certain personality, certain person. Let's talk about some of the characteristics that would work well for this job, because what I'm hearing from you is left brain, right brain. And it sounds like you're kind of really sort of bridged that gap nicely. But what are some of the other traits that you think would make a good technical writer?
Check your ego at the door, number one. Number two, attention to detail. Number three, investigating the ecosystem, if you will, before asking the engineer a question, so that you might discover the answer on your own. One of my personal on my personal checklist is, have we asked the same question before? Engineers love to answer questions, but they get a little testy when you come back to them with the same question for the third time.
Yeah. Couple of questions. I want to talk a little bit about tools, because Tova had another question here, which I think ties into this. One of the questions is talking about the best tools and software used in the industry. So I want you to talk about that for technical writing, but then also Tova's asking, do you have experience with the publication tools used for commercial documentation? Where do you learn that? So I feel like those are both kind of tools related. Can you answer those questions?
Yeah. Yes, I can. And I've used a lot of tools. I mean, some of the industry standards would be like FrameMaker. I mean, that's an old. It goes back many years. Adobe InDesign, one of my favorites. And Adobe InDesign is a product I would use if I was going out to a professional publication, for instance, particularly if I've got to work with high-end graphics. What's really common in the industry today is understanding basic HTML. And then there are a couple of couple of subsets of HTML that work really well, and typically you'll hear the term Markdown. And Markdown is just a way. It's a shortcut. It's a shortcut that is interpreted into HTML in the browser. So, for instance, you do an H1 title, whatever your title is, and then close the H1. Well, with Markdown, all you do is the and there's the key on the keyboard. The not the slash, but the number 3 with the shift key hit. Why does that completely escape me right now? Oh, well. But yeah, so stuff like Markdown. Some of the other tools you're going to run into, and particularly when you're getting into more complex environments. So, for instance, WebEx uses a publication process. So you're typically writing with a tool like Oxygen, and they use what's known as DITA. That's Darwin Information Typing Architecture. And DITA is a way of being able to reuse content without having to completely rewrite it. So if I've got an introductory paragraph and I need to use that in 4 different places, all I have to do is write it once. And I use a tool like Oxygen, and then it's stored in the content management system. And then once a week when they do a build, it automatically, that's what they call the pipeline.
Cool.
Is that too much in the weeds?
Well, maybe for some people, but if there are probably some people on this call that are really right there with you that would want to hear this, I'm thinking Tova. Lori Bailey says it's perfect. So that's good, because these are people that are probably already very well versed in technical writing and really want to make that next step, which would be to break into technical writing. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you had to outline a step-by-step plan, how do we break into technical writing for our next step here? We're ready to get that job.
You call yourself a technical writer, and you make sure that you have some samples to show someone. First thing I would do would be to create your own personal website that actually illustrated what you can do.
So you don't even have to do like an internship or I mean, you could, obviously it's probably helpful, but
that's always helpful. You want to be in some position where you're actually doing it. Now, there are a lot of jobs. So, technical writing is, that's what I do. But, I've had titles that say business analyst. I've had titles that say QA. And you really need to distill down what you're doing for the position. So, for instance, I was at PG&E, and we did an app that actually measured the damage an earthquake would do to the infrastructure, so that as soon as we got the information from the earthquake GSS site, as soon as we got that information, they could run it, and there was a guy who had figured out all the algorithms, and based upon the movement and based upon, the intensity, they could determine how much damage was done, where it was done, and start rolling trucks to fix it.
Wow.
And, in the middle of that project, as we were just getting ready to start testing it, we had I think it was a 4.8, 4.9, something like that, up in Sonoma. And we ran that information through it. PG&E made the call to actually roll the trucks. Now, normal circumstance, they would pull 4 dozen supervisors off of whatever they were doing. They'd put 2 of them in a car, and they'd start driving around the streets and making notes. And they would do that for 3 or 4 days, and then they would start sending repair vehicles out. PG&E, and it would take from there, it would take anywhere from, 3 to 4 weeks, to fix everything. PG rolled the trucks immediately, and the town of Sonoma was up and running in 3 days.
So cool.
And yeah, that was, and my title for that was DBA.
Wow.
Because what I was documenting were all of the stored procedures in the database that did the calculations.
And Maria had a question. I'm kind of falling in line with that. Talk a little bit more about how you use data and data science in your work. Well, you just explained that, but talk a little bit more. But give us some more examples of that.
This is all. Data science is just a fascinating term. I've been working with data for years. I mean, you just can't get away from it. I remember when we were just using basic tools and just to be able to extract the data, transfer the data, or transform the data, and then load it into a cube so you could run basic analysis was a hot thing. So we've gone from that, and now we have the world of science, the actual science part of it, the statistics, and the data modeling. So one of the things I did with Facebook was work with the data modelers, and these are the statistics PhDs that work in data science at Facebook. And these guys were these guys were looking at data from a way that it just amazed me. It's like, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. How did I miss that? So in the world of technical writing, and particularly when I was working with the MySQL team. Now, yes, Facebook runs on MySQL, open source, and they've made some tremendous contributions to the open source community. Somewhere around 50 petabytes of data. Yeah. So when in the world of data science, when these guys want to start looking at models and creating, looking for the insights, they would come to me because I've written the documentation as to how they access the database, for instance. And what kind of programs can we create? So what I did in the world of data science was the under the cover stuff that allowed the data scientists to get their job done.
That's fascinating. You've been mentioning some of these projects. Do you have a favorite project, and if so, why?
I would say I have a lot of them. Which is my favorite?
Just one, right?
There were a couple. There are three that come to mind. One was way back in the day. I don't know if you remember WebVan. WebVan was the first online delivery service.
Oh, okay.
They were the first, and that's where I really got into all of the back end systems, and I just had a blast with it. I mean, that's where I really started to look at code and really started having fun with it. Facebook was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, imagine.
And
when did you work on the Facebook? What year was that?
I was at Facebook for 2 years, September 2018 to September 2020.
Okay, so not too long ago. I was going to say, if you were like in the early years, if you thought that it would be.
No. I actually got there. And Facebook is a good example of why you need technical writers, because up until probably 2010, Facebook didn't have a technical writer. They didn't realize they needed a technical writer.
Wow.
And that's
mind-blowing right there.
They are still cleaning that up. They are still, there are web pages out, wiki pages that haven't been touched in 10 years. And it's, just, there's only so much you can do.
Wow.
Facebook was a blast. I mean, just seeing how the internal systems worked. When you load a Facebook page, you probably don't recognize you're loading like 5,000 different programs.
No.
Yeah, I mean, and then all of the back end systems to support them. I worked on the notifications team. Every time you open Facebook, you get little notifications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh.
well, I worked on that project.
So that's your fault.
It is my fault.
Your fault.
It is my fault.
Every 5 minutes now.
You can actually turn them off if you want. But probably the one that excites me the most is the one I'm working on right now, which is Anthem.
Oh.
And when you say Anthem, everybody says, "Huh? Anthem?" I said, "Yeah, that big health insurance company, that big one."
Yep.
They have a small group, about 6 people, that are working on an AI component. And what they're doing is they're applying, 6 people. 3 of them are PhD statisticians. Cool. 2 of them are AI experts, and then they've got a programmer.
Wow.
And what they're doing is they're looking at, obviously, this huge data pool. Mm-hmm. They're saying, how do we, the first thing out of the gate is going to be, how do we help doctors keep people healthy? They're looking at it and they're saying, maybe the money isn't to be made in treating people. Maybe there's more money in keeping people healthy. And so they're putting together a program that will help doctors create an end result. And let me give you an example of that. And we'll take type 2 diabetes because that's really common.
Right.
So right now, a 40-year-old woman walks into her doctor. The doctor runs all the tests and said, "You've got type 2 diabetes." He's got somewhere around 20,000 different types of treatment that he can prescribe. So what Anthem is going to do is they're going to say, hey, you've got a 40-year-old woman with type 2 diabetes and the following other conditions. What are the outcomes of, how many 40-year-old women with type 2 diabetes with these conditions do we have in our database? And maybe they only come up with 10,000 out of 10 million. But out of that 10,000, the doctor can then take a look at it and say, wait a minute, how did we get the best results? And based upon the outcomes, they can say, look, this is the best way to go.
Wow. That's interesting.
It is, particularly in the world of HIPAA, because we need to scrub all of that information without identifying anyone.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a big, that's a project that you're working on. How long will you be working on that project? I mean, that sounds like a big undertaking. Is that a contract?
This is, well, we started out with a 6-month contract, and then they came back and said, well, after 6 months, maybe we'd like to hire you, contract to hire. I said, okay. And if not, I said, well, if not, you'll just be here for a long time. How long's a long time? This could be 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Okay. So that's kind of cool. That sounds, Tova had a question. Are they using external sources which specialize in personalized medicine?
I don't know the answer to that question right now. Right now, what they're doing is they're providing the information to the doctors that are in their plan. So I don't know if they are. I don't think they're aggregating any data, any external data. Did I understand the question correctly?
I'm not sure. Tova, you want to clarify on the chat?
You can also unmute, Tova. if
Oh yeah, you can ask. Go ahead. You can converse directly if that's easier.
So there are companies that specialize in trying to interpret data for health outcomes to create a more personalized medical experience, so that you have the ability to tailor things and better target therapies.
Right.
But those would not be under the umbrella of insurance.
You are.
So I was
You are
wondering
correct.
if they're sort of collaborating with these companies that's their niche.
At this point, I don't think so. I can get that verified. At this point, I don't think so, but I know that that is their end goal, is to be able to tailor a treatment specifically to an individual. And my guess is that when it works, they're going to socialize it to other practitioners that aren't in their plan, because that just makes sense to me, at least.
Going back to Facebook, W. Carter Jr. 68 had a question about Facebook, asking, how long did it take you to write procedures at Facebook? You said you were there a couple of years, but
yeah,
how long was that?
I worked on a couple of great projects at Facebook. The first one was the survey platform, and if you've gotten a survey on Facebook, I was on that one too.
So you have all my personal information, including my firstborn child?
No. And let me clear that up. So if I were to wander into someone's personal information,
Mm-hmm.
before I could actually see the information, I would get a little pop-up that said, "You do not have access to this information. And if you continue, we are going to notify your manager, the director, and the vice president."
That's cool that they have those layers in place.
Absolutely. And I wandered in accidentally once, and I saw that and said, you know what? I don't want anything. I just don't want to go there. It's just not a place to be. So to answer the question, processes and procedures, yes, I spent a lot of time writing processes and procedures, but not just that. On the survey platform, for instance, and this was common in Facebook. 90% of the tools they had were meant for engineers, and you would embed them in your code. So you wanted to run a survey, you've got an application, you'd embed the survey code in your application, and that's when you would see it. That's when the end user would see it, when they clicked on the application. And then we got to the point where we had a large group of people who wanted to run surveys, but didn't necessarily have an application, or maybe weren't really good with code. So they put a UI on it so that, okay, so you can create your own survey from a UI. And it was absolutely, when I got there, I took a look at it, sat down with the technical program manager, bless your heart, Alex Case, and said, Alex, this is absolutely unusable. I don't know how to document this. I have no idea what's going on here.
Wow.
He said, okay. And they walked me through it a couple times, and it was just like, okay, I understand all the components that are needed. This doesn't work. His response was, well, then what would work? I said, give me a week. In a week, I came back to him with wireframes and a workflow, demonstrated it to the team, and it was a great team. We had 6 engineers on the team. They loved it. We did a couple of iterations. Alex took it up to the C-level, and the next thing I know, we had a UX engineer working on the team.
That's cool.
Then I wrote the documentation for it. So processes and procedures in documentation is absolutely critical. you set the context, you explain who should be reading it, why they should be reading it, and then you provide the steps to get the job done. That's what I do. And part of what I really enjoy, particularly when I'm working with code, is making sure the steps all work.
Yeah.
So that any 3-year-old with 10 years of experience could actually follow my steps and create a program or instantiate a network, whatever.
That
So
sounds
it's absolutely critical.
Let's talk a little bit more about your work life, your workflow. Obviously, we've been in COVID. Everyone's pretty much working at home. You said you are Silicon Valley based, and therefore you're getting salary premiums. What does the future look like for that? In other words, are you going to start to see people going to more second tier cities? Is it not going to matter as much to be in Silicon Valley?
It's not. It's not. I'm seeing more and more of that where I'm hearing from recruiters that are saying this is 100% remote. Like, okay, where is it? I just talked to a recruiter before we started. She had a position in Tampa, Florida. I had an interesting project with Humana. They were out of Louisville. And Humana was interesting, except that it was on East Coast hours. And I had a boss that liked to do an 8 a.m. status meeting.
So it sounds like this has been great for you, because it sounds like what you do is like many technical jobs, as long as you've got a computer, a keyboard, and internet access. I mean, you can pretty much work from anywhere now, right?
I literally can. And
are you loving that? Or do you miss like the team? Or I miss
the team aspect.
Yeah.
There is particularly in the position I'm in, when I need to work with engineers, there's so much you pick up in the 5 or 10 minute water cooler conversation, or when you're getting coffee, or I'm stuck on something and I can stand up and walk 10 feet and sit down next to the engineer who wrote it and get an answer. Yeah, I miss that. I miss that a lot.
Yeah. And we don't know what is this going to look like? I guess it's anyone's guess if people want to kind of go in offices. But
I think we're going to end up in a hybrid situation. I haven't worn a pair of jeans in over a year.
Well, it's
think about that.
Only a head and shoulders shot right now.
I've got my sweats on. I'm always in my sweats.
Right?
Yeah, but I think we're going to be in a hybrid situation. I've got friends who are still working at Facebook. They're going to be remote for a long time, and when they come back, it'll probably be 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, if I could being in 1 or 2 days a week would be perfect.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people feel the same way. We have some other technical questions here on the chat.
Sure, absolutely.
Daisy says, why don't the engineers and the ITs document or write them themselves, even if it's retrospective, even if it is retrospective process?
Many times I will talk to an engineer who actually does do a pretty good job, and all I have to do is wordsmith it. Love that. Absolutely love that. In other cases, they make what often happens with in the world of IT is the engineers make assumptions. They make assumptions that if you're running a Linux command, you know what the switches are. And that may not always be the case.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the reasons that I really want to be able to keystroke everything, is that if I've missed something, we can catch it before the end user gets it.
Yeah. A couple more questions. We want to talk about women, specifically minority women. Question, how can minority women show a more substantial presence in big data conversations and platforms? So we are seeing more women, obviously, in tech.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, just be there. Which sounds trite, but when I was at Facebook, all of my managers up to the VP were women.
that's cool.
That's the way it is. In the world of big data, it's like in the world of data science, and excuse me if I use data science and big data interchangeably. There's not a large minority presence, and particularly women. And it's like anything else. You get your foot in the door, you work hard, and companies, big companies, and particularly places like Google, Facebook, you will move up the ladder quickly.
That's cool. And you've been in the industry for a while. Have you seen that evolution even more so in recent years? I mean,
I have. I mean, some of my one of my favorite all-time bosses, and we still talk to this day. Minority woman, and it was she's smart.
Yeah.
Smarter than me.
I love that. I love that we are seeing more women in tech.
We
And
are. The other thing I'm seeing that I think is important is within the bigger scope of tech. We're seeing large companies, and Facebook is a good example, Intuit's another one. They actually have formed groups to promote women, to promote minorities, and I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of those groups. I think what they're doing is phenomenal.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to see. A good friend of mine, Robin Cohen, she used to head up a group called Girls in Tech. You may be familiar with it. They were, really big in Silicon Valley.
As a matter of fact, my former boss at Facebook headed up the Women in Tech group for Facebook. So
that's cool. In the boss that you mentioned, do you know her backstory? June was asking, do you know how she got her foot in the door and then made it up the ladder? Do you have any insight on her? I just found that interesting.
I don't. She was a hard worker, and she was just wicked smart.
That's cool. There was a question that we talked about that you wanted me to ask. We talked about, does the voice of the other have a place in customer-focused writing? Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So in technical writing, it's always the voice of the other, and I'm hoping that I'm catching the context of the question. Nothing I write is ever about me. When it becomes about me and my ego gets involved, it's going to go south pretty quickly. So you're always looking for the voice of the other, and I'm always writing to that to make sure that their needs are addressed in what I'm writing.
That is very cool. That's all great advice. It's all so fascinating and interesting. There's some other questions here that we want to talk about. What are the challenges that we should be aware of for writing in the 21st century, for technical writing? What are some of the big challenges you think?
The biggest challenge is that nobody reads it. I remember joking that I'm the only published author that's never been read.
You mean like boiling it down like manuals, like reading those?
Yeah, I'm absolutely. A good friend of mine at a former job was he was a tech support manager, and he used to love. He'd get a customer on the phone, they'd be complaining about something, and he'd love to say, "Did you read page 64? Is there something about that you didn't understand? Let's go to page 64."
Why do we do that? Why do we just think that like we just turn something on and make it work? Like I don't know. I think we're all guilty of that.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, I recently, what was it? It was a portable vacuum cleaner. I just got it out of the box, put it together. It's like, okay, this isn't working. So what am I looking for? The instructions. Had I read the instructions first, I would have saved myself 20 minutes.
Right? It's so funny. That is very.
You're absolutely right. That's what we do. that is, it's that instant gratification thing.
Here's another question. What is another position that you could potentially pivot into if you decided that you didn't want to be a technical writer either anymore, or maybe give us some other options that you're still with?
So one of the things about being a technical writer in a specific area is you really become an expert in that area.
Yeah.
Okay. So from technical writing, you could easily go into QA, quality assurance. You could go into product management. You go into program management. You could go into, become something like a business analyst. Those are all areas that are easily, it's an easy transfer. And in many cases, what you'll do is you'll find yourself doing the job that's got that title, instead of like, I'm a technical writer, but I'm really a business analyst here. I mean,
many different, skill sets.
Yeah. Cool. But the most important is being able to listen and make sure that the person you're talking to knows that they've been heard.
Yeah. Tech is so broad. We think of tech. Tech is huge in so many facets. Are there any particular niche areas of technology where you feel like technical writing is going to blow up? I mean, I'm just thinking like off the top of my head, like crypto, or, I mean, is there anything where you're seeing like a huge boom in the technical writing arena?
Right now, artificial intelligence, which is a component of data science, is huge. Machine learning is huge. Natural language is huge. And those are areas that haven't necessarily seen a big surge in technical writing. Crypto is an interesting area. That is an area that right now doesn't have a lot of technical writers, and they're going to need them. They're going to need them soon as this becomes, as crypto becomes more popular. Another area that is really big that's going to be taking off is fintech.
Okay.
Fintech is going to be huge. And
again, can you explain what that is? By that.
So fintech is, some people refer to them as shadow banks. So you've got companies that are like actually, pardon?
Like Venmo, like those cash apps and that stuff?
Not quite. This is more like, there's a company called Galileo. Intuit is doing it, where you've got companies that actually have the ability to handle all of your financial data, and then provide additional add-ons, loans, the whole gambit of services you would normally think a bank would offer, but they aren't a bank.
Got it. Okay. And thank you, Maria. FinTech, financial tech. Okay. Now it all makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, I'm
See?
sorry.
I'm learning.
Thank
I'm
you.
learning along
Thank
with you guys.
I'm sorry.
I try to pass myself off as a tech expert, but I don't think anyone's buying it. So thank you for
Stephanie, you just need to become buzzword compliant,
right.
and you can get any job as a technical writer.
Thank you. How about gaming? Gaming
God, I
seems
love.
huge.
Gaming is huge. I love gaming. Personally, I love Minecraft, but that's a different story. And one of the things I love about developers is typically they are, a lot of them are into gaming too. So there's a common bond there. For technical writing, gaming, writing in the gaming ecosystem is a unique animal. A lot of it is going to be focused on the application programming interface, the API, and the back end, and then how do we allow developers to create mods for the games that we have, mods or modifications. So, in Minecraft, somebody might say, I'm going to create some custom skins for the players or something like that. The other side of gaming are the writers that actually work with the people that are crafting the story. And God, I wish I could figure out how to get into that side of things. That would be a blast.
Yeah, you'll be proud of me. I'm very well versed in gaming. I have an 11-year-old boy who is
You do
coding, programming. He has Discord servers and he does Minecraft mods and Roblox and oh my gosh, it's
okay.
crazy.
I would probably
I'm redeeming myself.
If he's got those interests and he's good at it 11, he's going to have a very good future.
Thank you.
No
yeah.
doubt.
I think you and he would I can definitely see a mind meld going on there. Oh yeah. And then one of our, Carter said screenwriters for games is kind of what you were saying.
Yep. Yes. Although it's a step below it. You've got the screenwriter, but then you've got the writer who actually has to do some translation into how is that going to show up on the platform. And those two are going to work very closely together.
Yeah, that's cool. There's something here, other questions. How can consulting be translated through technical writing and big data in federal contracts? Do you have any experience with that?
I don't have any specific experience in federal contracts. I don't. But my experience with large contracts is often you will have business analysts doing a lot of the writing. And I know that there are contracts out there for technical writers within the context of federal contracts. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. So forward-looking for people on this call who are very interested in a technical writing career. Forward-looking, what else should they be looking at? Any other specific advice that you want to give folks who as they navigate this field and try to get a foot in the door or expand, grow?
Yes, there is. Find a good mentor. A lot of companies have mentor programs, but find someone who really understands the field and has a vision that you're simpatico with. Something that really vibrates with you, and then ask them for their mentorship. What mistakes did they make, or how would you handle this situation or that situation? That just the basics.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Well, this has been so fascinating. I want to open it up to you guys. We are getting a lot of questions in the chat, but I wanted to see if you guys wanted to speak up individually, if you had any verbal questions, and kind of, I want to, before Harry leaves at 4:30, I want to, make it more of a conversation base. So is there anyone that would like to chat specifically with Harry, ask him any, we can just sort of have a conversation. Is there anyone else on the call that you guys, anything else that you guys want to know about, talk about? You don't have to show you could just use your voice if you're not on camera. Because I feel like I don't want to miss any questions, Okay, wait, hold on.
I've got a question. I'm a journalist by trade and I write a lot. I used to write training manuals, like silly training manuals, like how to alter a men's suit. Let me tell you, you learn, even if you're not conversant in something, you learn how to do it. It was a 50-page manual on how to take measurements and all that. If you're not a technical person, say I love tech, but I'm not trained in tech. What courses could I take? What could I do that would get my foot in the door, for example, or anyone else that is in tech and just wants to learn how to write for tech? What do you need to, are there levels? You talk about coding. Yeah. I don't know how to code, but what should I learn how to do to be a tech writer?
So, there are a lot of colleges that offer a technical writing certificate. I would start there with just a basic certificate. The other thing is,
oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any schools to suggest? That's my other question. I'll let you continue.
I know
sorry,
San Diego State's got a good one. Berkeley's got a good one. I don't know about San Jose State. Those are the ones that I'm familiar with immediately. Join. There are technical writing groups out there. There's a website out there by Tom. Yeah, his name is gone. It's called Write the Docs. He's got some great stuff up there. How to document APIs. Just some amazing stuff. And let me just double check to make sure I've got that right. Yeah, it's called writethedocs.com. And just there's a bunch of stuff up there. There are other websites that have got similar resources. Jump in.
Cool. And we had Carter. Did you want me to can we unmute you? Looks like you had a question. Maria, can you unmute Carter? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Harry. I'm joining the cybersecurity program on Monday. And in the world of cybersecurity, what's my best avenue for technical documentation in that area of expertise?
That cybersecurity is a big area. If you have the opportunity to get a top secret clearance, I would do that because that's going to make you like immediately employable. But in the world of technical writing, find some security product and create some samples for yourself. Create some samples so that when you say I'm a technical writer in the cybersecurity area, you can point them to or email them samples of work you've done. That could be, it could be something like, how do I use OAuth or how do I use SS security, something like that.
Good.
Thank you very much.
I mean, does that answer your question? Is there more there that you'd like me to address?
No, I think you've given me plenty of area to look at. And okay. I do technical writing from what I've done for my job many years. I've got 27 years in IT, and I've written a ton of documentation in my time, from procedures and how-tos, and for people who are
Perfect.
walking in off the street. That's how I was taught to write documentation, is take it from the standpoint you've got a 16 to 18-year-old coming in to scan documents or do a tape backup or something they've never seen before, and you got to walk them through it the first time so they can do it every single time.
You realize that we're probably the only two people on this call that know what a tape backup is.
Right. Probably.
I know what a tape backup is, like a tape for like TV. Like we have backup tapes all the time in our business. So that's just what I'm don't know.
Yes.
Well, talk about DLT and all the different formats and how much storage they hold and all that crazy stuff. It can get complicated quick.
With your background in technical writing, you've got a lot of samples to show people, and then having the degree in cybersecurity is going to open all the doors you need.
That sounds
Awesome.
Anyone else want to talk about their things that they're working on in terms of technical writing, steps that they're taking, or any areas of interest specifically that anyone's specifically looking at this point? Oh, who is that? Richie. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm also studying cybersecurity, and I'm wondering what you see the future of that industry, where you see it going, and if you have any additional advice.
Yeah, cybersecurity will no longer be a viable industry when we no longer have hackers.
Which is never.
Right. So that's, the trick in cybersecurity is always being one step ahead, I guess. Yeah, it's going to be a booming industry, and particularly with crypto becoming more popular. I mean, the basis of crypto is cybersecurity. So.
And a question was along those lines, Harry. Obviously, we see every, so often now, hackers got into, whatever it be, Facebook, Blue, anything, right? They steal millions and millions of people's data and information. What is the technical writer's role in that? I mean, if at all, like, do you have to work on your skills to protect, like he's going into cybersecurity, like how would his skills translate in protecting data as a technical writer?
So there are a couple of different ways. So for instance, in the world of protecting data, an organization needs to, they've got these things called SOX audits, Sarbanes-Oxley, and there are, if you're a publicly traded company, you have to have done a SOX audit, and data security is one of the big things. So somebody's going to come in and say, okay, so how do you protect your data? And you're going to hand them a document that explains exactly how the data is protected. On the other side, you're going to have instructions for, let's say, the DBA as to how to protect the data. Is this sensitive information? And if so, in a database, that column needs to be encrypted. And then who has access to that column? And do they have access to all of it, like a full social security number, or do they have access to maybe just the last 4 digits? So how do you set all of that up? That's all going to be documented so that when someone isn't sure, they can double check.
So it seems like you said a booming field, like it seems like the potential is endless. You'll need to document everything, and that's where the writing comes in. That's really cool. That's good to know. Okay, I'm going to make a note of that myself, because that seems like an amazing, opportunity there. Tina had a question. If you already have an education in creative writing and fine art, but are also technically and mechanically inclined, what would be a good avenue to pursue or a starting point? And she says, in data science ATM.
It's interesting. one of my former, I was just chatting with one of my former coworkers at Facebook, as we were doing Minecraft, by the way, and he's got he got his degree in creative writing and then got his MFA.
Wow.
And he is probably one of the most technically astute people I know. So if I had that background and I wanted to break into technical writing, I would take probably, I'd learn something like Python.
Mm-hmm.
So you write basic Python programs, because that is that and R are like the two main languages in the world of data science. And then, find a company like a Facebook that will hire you as an entry-level writer. And when they call and say, well, we really don't want you for that, we want you for, end user content or something, say, no, I want to be a technical writer in the data science area. That's what I would recommend, just off the top of my head.
That's cool. Yeah. And Maria said that entities students learn both of those. And I was going to say, my son, 11 years old, went to UCode and he learns Python. So
Exactly.
yeah. So
exactly.
If, young kids can learn it, like it's a good, foray in.
Absolutely. When I was interviewing with Anthem, there was like a 2-week break between interviews. So just for the heck of it, I took a look at Python and created a small website based on Python.
Oh, that's cool.
And if I can learn it, anyone can learn it.
I thought Python, my son was using it to program some little robot. It's also program robotics.
Yeah.
I think isn't that,
Mhm.
okay. That's what I thought. I thought it was Python. That's great. Leticia says, looking for positions online, almost everyone is asking for a master's PhD in STEM. Is that
Come on.
happening?
So if it's an entry-level position, yeah, they're probably going to ask for a degree.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in this business over 20 years. Nobody asks me about a degree anymore.
Yeah. But like you said, maybe things have changed. It's gotten more competitive. Like they really want that degree now. STEM degrees were not around years ago, even so much when, maybe when you and I were in college. I mean, I don't remember it being as prevalent as it is now.
Well,
and how do you get around that?
Well, if you've got, if I had a minor in mathematics, I would say I'm STEM qualified.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a minor in engineering, yeah.
Or get those certificates you mentioned, maybe?
Or a certificate. The state of recruiting today is not what it was. It's not what it was a few years ago, 10 years ago. When you submit a resume, there's probably a 99% chance that resume is being scanned into a system and they're just looking for keywords.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got the keyword, it's gonna go somewhere for review. If it doesn't, they won't. So, what I would do if I read an ad like that and they were looking for a master's or a PhD, odds are pretty good they're going to say master's, PhD, or equivalent experience.
Mm-hmm.
HR is the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
I would look to see what technologies they're mentioning, and if you've touched those technologies, I would put it on the resume, because that's what the machine's going to see.
But also too, I mean, I kind of want to throw this out there too. I don't know if this is helpful to anyone, but And maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see the technology field, much like any other field, mine being broadcasting, extremely competitive.
Mhm.
I send out resumes all day long and apply to online jobs, and it goes into a black hole.
Yep.
So, you have to be creative, you network, you join up with places like Entity Academy, you meet mentors, you go to networking events, you find a backdoor in, so that
Absolutely.
they know you and who you are and your skill set as an individual, as opposed to just a resume reading keywords. I mean, that's just,
Exactly.
I feel like maybe that advice sort of translates to any field, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, networking. I mean, I had like a 6-year period where I never sent a resume out.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I would make a couple phone calls, and I'd get phone calls back, and people would say Harry's available, and pretty soon I get a call.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would call somebody that I knew had a position open and just introduce myself. That's hard to do these days.
Yeah.
The days of having a company phone on your desk they're gone.
Well, and June brings up a good point in the chat. How do you network now with all of the in-person restrictions, COVID restrictions? Do you have any advice on that? Obviously, we're hoping that these are going to be passing us by sooner, but the world has changed, and I don't know. How do you network now?
It has, and networking. You find groups that resonate. Maybe it's a Facebook group. Maybe it's a website community. Maybe it's a WordPress site that is dealing with technical writers, and you get to know them.
Yeah,
that is probably that is probably more important today than it's ever been. I mean, it is a competitive market out there. The other things to look for, and I had a former coworker who had been out of a job for over a year. It's like, and I just couldn't. It's like that something strange there. And when I looked at his resume, he literally had, it's like the last job, and that was it, and there was nothing to explain what he'd been doing for a year. And I was like, dude, I said, what have you been doing for a year? Well, I did this, did it. It's like, oh, you were mentoring at your kid's school? You don't think that's important?
Right.
You volunteered. It's like, put that on there. And call yourself an independent consultant, and here's what you did. You mentored, you did this, you did it. And he added that to his resume, and within 2 months he had a job. Companies are funny about gaps.
I mean, I will say, in all fairness, I do think women have an easier time with gaps, because at least in my history, I can say, well, I've been, taking care of my kids or whatever, which you just saw my little 4-year-old daughter interrupting us. But yeah, I would think the whole gap thing I thought we were past that, though. I am surprised to hear you say that. I thought as a society, we were over that. People get laid off every day of the week.
Yeah, we are not past that.
That's
it's still something to be aware of.
Okay, so don't show a gap. All right, well, we are winding down here, so I just want to thank you. This was so interesting and fascinating, and so insightful. So yeah, thank you so much, Harry. Thank you for
absolutely my pleasure.
About your field, and congrats on your success and continued success. And hopefully this was helpful to you guys on the call and all of you pursuing a career in technology, whether it be technical writing or something else. I wish you guys all the best of luck. And thank you guys again for letting me moderate this Fireside Chat.
Stephanie, thank you so much again for your time today. We really appreciate it. And Harry, I'm going to put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind. We won't inundate you, but if anyone has a question or can they get in touch with you somehow? LinkedIn, what's the best way? to reach out to, because we really appreciate your expertise, because you know what? I can say this as well. It's often not so much what you know. Yes, that's important, but networking and being able to pick someone's brain, even just ask a question, say, can you refer me to someone? It's great. So thanks for helping our people that are here on the call today.
Yeah, LinkedIn would probably be the easiest. Just send me an invite and mention that you saw me on this chat, so I have some context and I know that you're not another recruiter.
And then you can refer people.
Well,
there you go.
I can answer questions. I can offer advice. I can review resumes.
Thank you. It's a huge help, and we really appreciate you taking the time and becoming an entity mentor. Anyone have any last words they want to throw out? Any last quick questions or anything for Harry or Stephanie? If not, we'll sign off, and I say thank you to everyone for being with us on the call today. It was great. I learned a lot.
Very much.
Thank you, June. I'm curious. We've got 20 some participants here. Was this of value to you?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Glad everyone learned a few things and had a good time and spent some of their Thursday afternoon with us. So I'll say goodbye to everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So much.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
For coming, folks. Bye.